So as we bring this in now, sort of mapping the process, the acquisition process. So there are different stages. So at a very early stage, the customer maybe doesn't even know they have a problem. Or they just, yeah. So part of it may be just making them aware that, oh, this is even something you should think about. And again, it's hard to convince someone of this. I mean, often it's something happens. The economy slows and they don't have enough customers. Okay, they wake up. They decide they want to sell their business. That would be something. They want to add an associate or a partner, so they need it to be a little bigger. They need it to be attractive to get the kind of person they want. But it can be things like Google announces a major change to their algorithm, and they're like, oh my God. Or it's happened, and they were showing up really well, and now all of a sudden they're not. So those are all, in a sense, trigger events, but that kind of gets them moving. And typically, the person that's going to notice that is the dentist. It could also be the office manager here. And when it happens, like it happens in a day, or usually it happens pretty quickly. Something happens and they're thinking about it. And so the action plan here is typically, in a broad sense, you want to be top of mind. You want to be a name that they think of, ideally. And so with this particular company, we did a lot of this through partnerships with dental associations. We worked very hard to show up at the top of Google search results. A lot of trade show presence, but you could be doing other things like advertising in print. There are a lot of ways, or even just being a thought leader. So this is where we kind of talk about marketing content. If you're the one that's, if they keep reading, if you're showing up in a lot of places kind of explaining the hard issues, they'll think of you first. And the risk is that they don't find us, or they don't think of us when this happens. And so again, this is sort of, what's your risk mitigation? You want to be in multiple channels. You want to be front of mind. And then this next step is they sort of decide like, oh, I got to do something about it. So typically people start online. They look for information online. If they're going to a trade show, maybe they do something there. Again, this is probably the personas is sort of the dentist and the office manager, but often if there's an office, if it's a slightly bigger practice, there's an office manager and they're effectively the business manager, and they're the one that starts looking around saying, what are the options? And at this stage, I'm saying 1 to 14 days. I mean, it could be 1 to 13 days, but sometimes this whole process happens really fast, and I'm going to talk about that. In here for us, the action plan is really understand their priorities and explain your benefits, and reach the person you're trying to talk to, and don't look like everybody else. So the risk is you're not speaking to their particular persona, or you don't do a good job of speaking to the person you're really trying to target. Some of the risk mitigation is to address more than one persona, but again, there's sort of limits to that. You don't want to try to be everything to everybody. So there's a balance there. But we do think about when different personas come to our website, do they have different paths? How do they learn about information? So this next step is people sort of are at the point that they're, okay, I want to do something. Now I'm really want to understand what the different options are. So they're either really looking in detail on the website, or this is where they may very well talk to a salesperson and come in as a lead. And again, typically this is office manager. There is time 1 to 7 days. I mean, again, all this could happen in one day, really. And then some of what's important here is just having simple options. Like, you don't want to confuse people at this point. So bundles can be really handy. We've had a lot of dialogue around, do we have our pricing on our website, or do you not have your pricing? I mean, in terms of transparency, pricing, they don't have to figure it out. They know exactly what it is. You've made it easier to compare. The downside is it could prevent you from sort of starting selling high. But I kind of default towards having pricing right out there up front. And the risk here is they get confused, they can't decide. So if you give them too many options, they shut down. They can't decide. And a lot of what we do is sort of track conversion in lots of ways. We track conversion on the website, we track conversion through the sales funnel, once leads reach the sales team. And you slice and dice it a bunch of different ways. You could look at it by persona, you could look at it by lead source, you could look at it by salesperson to try to say, hey, is the funnel leaking somewhere in a way that we don't want it to? And then the next step, they're really getting serious about acquiring the product. So now they really want to know exactly what do I get? How long does it take to implement? What's it really going to cost? Again, sort of simple pricing and other things like communicating about, here's the timeline, and I use the term what to expect when you're expecting, right? That book. But it was really lay it out like, here's what's going to happen in the first couple days, and somebody's going to call you, and then this, and then we need your information, and this, and this, and this, and this. And ideally, when we lay that out, it's an opportunity to then come back and kind of beat all your goals. It's an opportunity, you've set an expectation, but it's an opportunity to win them over by proving that you're doing better at every step, better than you promised. And things like a guarantee can be really handy here. You want to reduce their risk up front. And some of the risk here is that you don't move fast enough. Because when the person kind of gets at this point, they're ready to buy. And you don't want to leave them sitting out there because they're probably talking to more than one vendor. So, somebody's going to close the deal. You want it to be you. And again, risk mitigation is sort of tracking response time, tracking lead conversion. And I'll just comment on this particular one, which is we had leads coming in off the website, and typical response time would be kind of a couple hours, maybe an hour. But we started experimenting with shortening that time, and the difference between responding to a lead in under 5 minutes, and actually we really targeted under 2 minutes, and say over 15 minutes, but it could be 15 minutes to an hour, it was like a 15% increase in conversion. Wow. So it's like you're already spending all this money to get customers. What if you could just increase your business 15%? That's what we're talking about. And that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about is sort of working the process and making it efficient, or really figuring out what works is what makes the business successful. Again, they pay, so it's ideally, we're setting up reoccurring billing. This is a model where you're billing them every month. It's the dentist that's really making the decision. Typical spend sort of upfront is between $1,000 and $10,000. It depends if they're getting some sort of custom work done. It's really happening the same day, but there are things like, hey, how do we get the credit card information, and how can we make that as easy as possible, and do we offer different ways? We'll take it over the phone. Here's a secure online way to do it. Because we've seen times where the deal was closed, and somehow we didn't get the credit card. They were supposed to go do something else, but then they didn't, or they didn't have the number they were going to get back. It's you lost the sale. Right. Or you didn't pay attention, and 3 weeks went by, and then it's an opportunity for them to drop out. So you just want to plug all those holes. Installation, so there's a lot of, customer is providing us information on setting up the website. Often you're working with the office manager, sometimes staff. So again, just thinking about what's a simple format for collecting information. And this is another drop-off point. They don't get back to you with information. So you're sort of engineering how can we get the information? This is when we started talking about things like, can we interview them during drive time? Can we, because they've agreed, they've done it, but if they don't give you the information and they're not getting any value because the website's not set up, who loses there? We do. And then it's really important, that they get use and value. So we're very much thinking about, like, what's the first good experience? So, some of the smaller companies, maybe they don't have email, or you're setting up email in a different way. So that's like, okay, they immediately have something. Ideally, they start getting new customers right away. So this getting the customer on board and having them have good experiences right away is important. And the risk is that they cancel. They just kind of go like, it's been 3 weeks and nothing's really happened. And that kind of goes back to where that managing expectations up front and being really clear about it, and then showing them that you keep beating it, it's just setting a good communication pace and kind of you're creating a good first impression. So some of the things we thought about here is like get email set up really fast, get the dentist to announce the site to lots of their customers, so now they're a little more committed, are just some of the things we would do. And then there's very much this period of time with the determining value. So, what the customer customers using it, sometimes they're using some of the functionality themselves. Hopefully it's really easy to use. Ideally they're getting customers, and this goes back to the whole, we talk about proving results, but we really want to be showing them like, oh, you got another customer, and the more clearly we can communicate that ROI. You got another customer and they turned into this much revenue, which gets into some more complex hooks into the practice or into practice management software. But to be able to prove that is gold. And that's, that goes back to some of that value prop and that benefit that we were thinking about. How do we really stand out? And then you want them to buy more. So here, customer trust is really important. They've got to have a good experience at this point. We want them to buy more services, and the upsell potential is really good. It could be like another $3,000, but it could be like $30,000. And typically the window we think about, really you can start upsell within 10 days if some magical thing happens. But in this business, we sort of thought more about 3 to 6 months was kind of the window to go back again, and certainly within a year. And again, how do you make sure that they're receptive? So, you have success teams that are really thinking about their business. And again, there was a lot that we did to track customer satisfaction, both sort of were people getting the benefits like new customers. We tracked just general satisfaction with Net Promoter Score, which we did in a lot of places. So every time we had a communication to them, even in email, we had a little set of functionality at the bottom that they could score us. And do people know what Net Promoter Score is?
Net Promoter Score?
So Net Promoter...
Something about the customer.
Yeah. So, really, it's this concept of if you could only ask one question, can you boil it down to just one thing? And really boiling it down to, like, would you recommend us to someone else? So, in the case of a business like this, would you recommend us to another dentist? Or would you recommend us to one of your peers? Is what it boils down to. And you can track that score. And I think Trish spoke about it the first day a little bit. Yeah. So that score really varies by category. In some categories are notoriously low and some are high. So kind of knowing the industry you're in is very helpful. But it's a great metric. And we could see that when things came off the rails, like we had problems and we knew we had problems in our service department, our Net Promoter Score would go down. So there really was a correlation. So that was important. And then, really Net Promoter is also this measure of word of mouth. Because if if people are saying, yeah, I'm going to tell other people, they probably are. And we did a lot in terms of encouraging that. So We had systems in the company where when a customer just had a really great experience and you knew they did, we had training that it was like, this is a great time to ask them for a testimonial. And then we had all the tools to collect it, you know, both verbally and writing, and we were experimenting with actually getting video. But at that moment, when they're in there like, oh my God, we think you guys are great. And those are gold. So, you know, it's like Amazon reviews. You know, if you're buying a product on Amazon, if it has 10 good reviews, it's sort of like, you know, it's pretty good. But if it has 1,000 reviews and it scores over 4 stars, it's hard to fake that. Like that by itself sells. I mean, and you can use it everywhere. You use it in your marketing, you use it in your advertising. So this is just sort of one view